Welcome to another edition of the magazine. Today we're here with Al Saulniers, and we're going to find out a lot about him and his history here. Welcome, Al. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us something about yourself.
Well, I'm locally born from Acushnet and was in the first graduating class at Stang and left the area for an undergraduate degree in math and then followed by a doctorate in economics and stayed out of the area for close to 40 years before returning in 2000.
And what made you return?
We had a mother who I had a mother who at that time was 81, who felt that I had been away for a long time and needed to shoulder some kind of family responsibilities. And so we took a base in New Bedford and used that for doing foreign consulting.
Okay. And you wrote a book in this time period.
Oh, I wrote several books in this time period. But the latest book is about the French of New Bedford.
Okay.
And it's the only complete treatment of the French in the area. Prior to that, there had been a small pamphlet of under 40 pages done in 1993 and an article published by Spinner in 1983. But this is a much broader view of the French communities of New Bedford. And I say communities because you had most coming from Quebec, but you also had people from the maritime provinces. You had people coming from France. Those from France or with French nationality came from mainland France, Europe, or the French overseas dominions and territories, mostly islands. Some of those were people of color. You had French-speaking Belgians, and you had French-speaking Swiss. So it was a series of different communities.
Okay, so lots of different migration patterns.
Lots of different migration patterns. The people from Quebec had an easy time because they could just take an overnight train coming down to New Bedford. The people who came from France or anywhere else in Europe had to go to a port city, get on a ship, cross the Atlantic, come into a port of arrival, and then make their way to New Bedford.
Okay.
The French tended to know they wanted to come to New Bedford, and their travel documents indicated where they were coming, who they were going to be meeting, and it was usually a relative. Okay. The Canadians had lots of different choices of medium-sized French citizen towns or French-speaking citizen towns in New England, and usually tried out a whole bunch before coming to New Bedford. Okay. Very few of them came directly here.
So what is the French connection to whaling?
There are lots of different French connections to whaling. In the late 18th century and the early 19th century, the French government paid New Bedford to help reestablish whaling.
Okay.
And people from here moved to France. In the first case, the French Revolution caused a number of issues along with fights with their neighbors so that slow-moving whale ships became targets for any of France's enemies, and the ships were sent for refuge to New Bedford. Oh. And they had French sailors aboard the ships, or French whalemen aboard the ships, and went whaling then. The same thing happened again in the 1820s. But during the entire period of whaling, you had people coming here from Quebec seeking adventure or lacking ready access to land, just an overnight train trip away. They came here. Now, back when I was in high school, I'd gone to the Whaling Museum and asked about French and French-Canadian whalemen. So they didn't exist. The French Canadians came to New Bedford only after the Civil War to work in the mills. I asked the same question at the Whaling Museum when I came back in 2000. I was told pretty much the same thing. So I went to the public library, spoke to the genealogist, and he said in 30 years of working there, he had only ever encountered 3.
Oh.
And as a professional economist, I knew they had to be coming. The question was how to prove it. And luckily, they had at that time a card catalog at the Whaling Museum with information about whalemen, individual whalemen. And so many French names start with LE or LA. On Saturday morning, I showed up with my portable or my laptop and pulled the first of the L drawers and started going through them. And I found about 150 that day.
Wow.
And so, yeah, they were there. The question was asking the right questions to find them.
Wow, that's great. So you've discovered a lot in writing this book. And did you discover anything about some local businesswomen that were French?
Now, there are the fascinating cases because powerful women, I always thought, were like the principal of the local school. Cordelia Vien was a businesswoman who built a small real estate empire in the North End. She had hotels, she had rental property, and she had her own theater.
Wow.
Hedwige Parra is a case that I found. Nobody really knows about her. In an article in 1913, the Boston Globe said that she was the only female builder and contractor in New England.
Wow.
She would buy property, design the buildings that she wanted to put up, buy all the material for the building, hire teams of professionals to put it up for her, and it was said that she could wield a saw or hammer along with the best of them, and just totally unexpected. Or another woman, Ida Marcotte, who got married in Quebec, moved with her husband and 3 children to Wisconsin, lived there for a while. The family grew. They wanted more land, so they moved to Minnesota and had more kids, and then they wanted even more land. So her husband went off to North Dakota to scout out and died there.
Oh.
Ida ended up in New Bedford with her kids who got jobs in the mills. She stayed at home for a while, then wanted to do something else. So she hired a draftsman, drew up plans for her, hired a builder who put up a building, and had a garage on County Street that she opened as the New Bedford Auto Mart, the first female-owned used car dealership and repair garage in New Bedford.
Wow.
Totally unexpected to find people like that.
Yeah, that's awesome, though. How about some local French celebrities?
Yeah, celebrities in silver screen. There were some early motion picture actors, actresses. Most of their films have gone because they were done on silver nitrate and are just gone. You had people on stage, a couple of magicians. You had people in the sports. Slip Dupre was the best known baseball player out of New Bedford, and the Red Sox wanted him, so they brought him up to Fenway for an exhibition. Before one of the games, they threw some balls to him, and he hit 3 successive balls out of Fenway. So they said, "We'd like to have you, but we're close to our limit on the number of people we can put on the team." So they sent him to a small feeder team in Connecticut and then to one up in Maine, and he injured his shoulder and never was the same after that. But his father, who lived in New Bedford, had also played baseball. And he had been a teammate of Connie Mack, Hall of Famer, when the two of them played together in Connecticut. So you had celebrities in lots of different fields in the French community.
How about some other French connections that you discovered? Maybe not as prominent as, playing for the Red Sox, but very prominent in the area.
In the area?
Yeah.
How about Dr. Normandin, who came here as a young man, worked as a clerk for a while, and decided to do something else. So he went off to Quebec, went to medical school, came back to New Bedford, and worked throughout the city He was an OBGYN and was often called the father of New Bedford French Canadians because he assisted at the birth of more than 7,000 of them.
Wow.
And there's a middle school named after him in the North End.
Sure. Normandin Junior.
Right.
Yeah.
Used to be Normandin Junior High School when we were growing up, now the middle school.
Yeah. Normandin Middle School. Yeah. That's great.
Totally unexpected to find out that he had been here before going to medical school. But his father had come down along with a couple of siblings until young Dr. Normandin, at that time, not yet a doctor, had worked here.
Well, that's good to hear because I know a lot of people probably don't know how it got the name.
Yes.
So this is great to hear.
Good.
So what's next? Another book?
This book had been something like 16 years in the making.
Oh, wow.
And it's taken a lot of time to pull totally different things together. I'm interested in various aspects that deal with it. We'll see if over time it evolves into a book. I'm not stopping the research, however.
So how can someone get a copy of this book? What are the ways they can get a copy of the book?
The book is currently available at Spinner Publications. It's either available by calling the office or available online. Consumer response has been really positive, and I've had to autograph at different sessions several books at a time that people were buying for their friends and relatives.
That's great. Any other upcoming events?
There's an upcoming lecture at the New Bedford Public Library.
Okay.
There'll be one at Plum Library in Rochester, one at the Mattapoisett Public Library.
Okay.
And that'll give me a chance to see people and hear a lot of stories that people tell me.
Okay, great. So what happened to the French community in New Bedford? It was very strong, as you've noted. So what happened to the French community?
Assimilation, I think, happened.
Okay.
You had a lot of intermarriage. I was at a party recently, and there was a young woman whose last name was Polish, telling me that she had a French great-grandfather. And I asked what his name was, and she told me, and I just happened to have his military record on my hard drive, so I sent it on to the family. So you had a lot of intermarriage. And then later on, you had, as people came to rely more on air conditioning, making areas of the South far more comfortable to live in, you had people deciding to leave the cold climates of New England and to go down to either Florida, Texas, Arizona, or California. And so the number of people with French ancestry is still fairly large, but it's a French ancestry that's often mixed with others.
Wow. Well, Al, thank you so much for educating me today, as well as, our community. And we got to get a hold of that book and discover more of our French heritage. There's probably French in just about everyone.
Thanks.
If you go through the genealogy.
That's true.
So I just want to thank you for being a part of our community, and thank you for your gifts and talents of being an author.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Al.
Okay.
Welcome back to the magazine. Now we're here with Joe Thomas, who is the publisher and co-owner of the Spinner Publications. And so we're going to find out something about the Spinner Publications here today. And also, we're going to find out about Joe. So, Joe, tell us something about yourself before the Spinner came into being.
Well, we started this back in, I think, 1981.
Okay.
Was our first publication. So that year, we formed the idea with myself and Donna Hughes, a sociology professor at UMass Dartmouth. And I was a freelance photographer. Stringer was a couple of newspapers and doing documentary work, photography. And Donna was a social scientist doing oral history and documentary stories of neighborhoods and such. Okay. We were both doing pretty much the same thing, except I was doing it more visually and she was doing it academically. So we got together and both decided that we wanted to really combine it into a format that we could share and distribute and put into the public sector in a way that was nice, keepsake, but important and entertaining. And the first few books were very heavy in photography and oral history. And that was our original mainstay. And from there, we branched out into more historical narratives and projects and documentary projects that were broader and encompassed subjects from all the surrounding towns in Rhode Island, as well as in this area, southeastern Massachusetts. So that's what got me going, and that was my general interest, having graduated in both sociology and photography. And Donna was a big part of those early days. And at some point during that time, in the 80s, so maybe the 90s by that time, Jay, who's with me today, joined. He's actually a relative of mine. He's my nephew. Okay. And he came aboard pretty much when he was at Vogue as helping out, helping with a lot of the tasks. And now he's pretty much running the place. So he started in some of the same ways I did, rather, rough and working your way through and trying to build the organization. He's been there with me all along the way. We've published about 50 books. Oh, wow. Roughly 50 books. And this last book with Al Saulniers that we just did, the history of the French in New Bedford. Jay worked exclusively with Al to design it and to illustrate it and to help with the editing and all of the mechanical work that has to be done to get a book out, the cover design. So he's been doing that all along the way. He's really taken over the design element and the typographic elements, as well as some of the editorial work. And we publish calendars as well. So we do half a dozen calendars every year, and that seems to be growing. And he's a big part of that as well. So
yes, we notice the calendars around town.
Yeah, the calendars have been very popular. We started doing that in I think it was 87, maybe around that time, as a sort of an idea to just raise funds.
Sure.
And now it's become a mainstay for us, a big part of what we do. And it's a nice way to get history out without doing huge research projects. We can do things that are light and brief, condensed, and get them out there in 12 pictures, 13 pictures.
Sure.
So that's been a lot of fun. And we've done, like I say, the 50 books, the Spinner volumes, that's how we began. We did 5 of them. And then we started just focusing on singular topics. And originally, we sort of had an ensemble, a group of people who did all the work. And many of them were from the university and from Swain School at the time. But now we really have grown to try to include freelance writers, local historians. We have a lot of scholars and professors and people from outside the area. The one thing we've maintained is the topics typically are locally centered. In other words, either the writer or the subject has to do with the history and culture of southeastern Massachusetts or southeastern New England.
Sure. So how did you get the name The Spinner?
Well, we sat in a classroom one day, late afternoon, and we were doing brainstorming, trying to come up with a name. We wanted something that had some geographic significance and cultural significance. Okay. And we thought of a lot of different things, but nothing really grabbed us that was different, that hadn't been used already. And so someone came up with the word spinner, and it seemed to have cultural significance in that a spinner was a factory worker, a textile worker, and we were doing a lot with the history of textiles.
Okay.
But it also had a nautical sense, like in a sail, a spinner. But it was also a spinner of tales, a spinner of yarns. The oral history aspect could be brought in there of what is, a spinner of stories. And after all, we wanted to really be a product that told stories. It was all about storytelling.
Okay.
So it worked. And we used it, and we put the subtitle, People and Culture in Southeastern Massachusetts, which I always thought was just too big and clunky.
Mm-hmm.
And so we shortened it just to Spinner 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5. But technically the title of the book was Spinner, People and Culture in Southeastern Massachusetts.
Okay.
So that's a kind of a long story, and that's a long title, and that's how it started out. But we really couldn't come up with a geographic and cultural word that was different, that hadn't been used. So that's how Spinner came.
Well, that's a great history of it. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
So you said about 50 books you've published so far?
Yeah, I think lost count a little bit, but it's in between 40 and 50.
Okay. And where did those ideas come from?
Well, at first we assigned them. They were ideas that came right out of our office. We had, a lot of different people working here, editors and writers. But then people started coming to us, submitting their ideas, who wrote, some of it nonfiction and some of it fiction, stories, memoirs, a novel, a lot of poetry, and people kept coming to us with their ideas. We were trying to be an open platform for writers and photographers. And so that's how a lot of the material came. And as a result, it's not, a lot of the work is not real popular. You wouldn't think of the topics as super popular, though there were some that were extremely popular. We did a book on Lincoln Park, the history of Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
And that was a phenomenal hit for us. We sold thousands of books there. We did a couple of cookbooks, which were very successful, and a history of the cranberry industry, which did well, and then histories of both Fairhaven and New Bedford. We did a nice piece on Manjiro, the Japanese boy who discovered America, so to speak.
Absolutely.
That was a great project and a wonderful project to do because of what it involved, so many people and translators and historians. So we've done a lot of different things.
Quite a bit in the archives.
Well, the archive, if you're speaking of the photographs, along the way we've been collecting images.
Okay.
And we came across a lot of collections, old collections, and some by the photographers themselves.
Okay.
Many of whom have passed away since. But beautiful collections of negatives, many of them negatives. And I think we've amassed at least close to a couple million images, and many of them, first generation negatives or prints. If you talk about digital, of course, you can get to a couple million in no time, the way people are photographing with their phones.
Sure.
But these are just historic photos. If we just look at that, we've got well over 1.5 million, I would think, by this time. For example, the Milton Sylvia collection. Milton Sylvia, a photographer with the Standard Times for decades, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s, I believe. He donated his entire archive or collection to Spinner before he passed away. And we've been able to get most of that up on the Digital Commonwealth site sponsored by the Boston Public Library. And these are things we're working on, trying to make them accessible, make the collections accessible and at least viewable for people.
I've noticed around your office that the amount of awards that Spinner has received, which really shows your organization's excellence. So tell us about the awards.
Well, probably the most prestigious, I think, is the Commonwealth Award. I guess it's
Commonwealth, yeah.
yeah, and it's in the humanities, and it's. I was selected the first round of it, along with Yo-Yo Ma was there, and a couple of other really, stellar individuals.
A good recognition of definitely the excellence for your organization.
Yeah, and that was nice because they recognized us for our work at Spinner and for doing exactly what we do, that is recording this cultural history and making it accessible to people. And similarly, we've been recognized by the city of New Bedford, the Senate, the House, the House, Senate, and House of Representatives for the exhibitions we've done on African-American history,
Excellent.
on labor history in the Bedford area, and the Fonterra Award from UMass. That was nice. And most of it all just comes right back to just recognition of our documentation of local history, regional history. There's a lot of demand for that now, a lot of recognition going now for that, more so today than any time in the past 20 years. We've been doing this for 45 years, so we've had a lot
Excellent.
of time to do it. But, when we started in the early 80s, it wasn't as popular as it is now. But I think more and more people are recognizing community history and cultural history, and even putting it in the pantheon of tourism, and saying that this is cities and towns can really capitalize on selling history and for visitors and tourists. And New Bedford's finally caught into that. It took quite a while. And Fall River is still sort of catching up, I think. And we really had felt all along that, things like our textile history, our ethnic history, and the fishing stories of the fishing industry, these were products and ideas and stories that people would be interested in, even if they weren't from around here.
Right.
And I think we've proven that to some degree. We'd like to continue and do more, get more excitement on it. But
well, the future is bright, Joe, especially with Jay on board as well. And we can't thank you enough for all the historical parts that you brought.
Thank you.
And many more ideas. Maybe someone watching has a nice idea they want to bring to the Spinner. So let's hope that we continue to grow for the future and keep the historical part active. And once again, Joe, thank you for your great work and thank you for your investment in our community.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.